These two rings changed my life. So 1 year ago, I graduated from New Approach School for Jewelers in Tennessee. And in that program, we made these two rings, among other things, a lot of stone setting, hand fabrication. But on week 5, I believe it was, we were working on this fully hand fabricated silver ring. It's a 3-stone ring made from nothing but sheet and wire. And this is its platinum counterpart that we did on the final week. I'm going to talk about each of them in turn, tell you what I learned about it, and why it changed my life. In my upcoming videos, I'll be talking about the custom projects that I have been able to make because of working on these two rings. If that's something that you're interested in, well, you know what to do. So the first thing that you need to know about full hand fabrication, because this is a term that I will use a lot, or handmade, it's also a term that sparks a lot of contention inside of the maker community because some people like to use the word handmade for everything that their hand touches. And that's to include some people that work on CAD, computer-aided design. I clicked the mouse, therefore it's handmade. But according to the law, that's not the case. According to the law, handmade in a jewelry context means it's all made by hand from basic components, nothing precast. So if you're doing lost wax, you're carving by hand, that's fine. There's an element of hand craftsmanship, but it is not handmade according to the law. Not my opinion, the law. So when we were making this silver ring, what we had to do, and the reason it was so influential on me, is that we started with 3 known stones. In this case, it was just oval CZ, cubic zirconia. But once you've got those sizes, you get sheet, and then you have to figure out how to make the rest of it. But fortunately for us, we have our instructors to tell us what we need to know. The things that you can't see just by looking at this finished ring. So one of the most subtle things about this ring is how you make a head to properly take stones. Remember, I'm the gemstone nerd first and foremost. Chief among schmucks. And because of that, I've been on a quest for many years to know how do I take the stones that I'm curating and bring them into the final stage of fine jewelry. Because the nicer your stones are, the nicer the jewelry has to be. Otherwise, it just sits in a safety deposit box and never reaches the light of day. And that's just tragic. So, with this ring, we started out with basic sheet, and they showed us how to get the proper spacing so that there's an upper gallery and a lower gallery. That way the culet's not poking you in the finger. And it has positive aesthetics. Looks nice. And one of the things that I didn't know until making this ring is that as we're applying geometry and figuring out the inner and outer diameters that we need to have that spacing properly, you also need much larger pieces of metal. If I was just doing computer-aided design or sculpting wax, I wouldn't have to do these extra steps. But because I'm just using sheet, once I find that spacing, I have to use additional pieces of metal to prop it up. And those pieces of metal at the end of the project will be cut away, and you'll never see it in the final ring. But if you don't use that metal in the manufacturing process for handmade jewelry, then you can't get that spacing. It doesn't work. You don't just glue it together, you have to solder it. So there's lots of these precarious steps that all rely on each other. Once you've got that spacing, you have to get the prongs on, you have to get the shank to come and meet up with that, and that all requires a certain amount of engineering and understanding of the process. And because of learning that process, immediately after graduating, I was able to make 2 engagement rings. One entirely hand-fabricated from gold, which I'll talk about in a different video, and another one using a wax casting process that I was able to do when I came back to Bangkok. And if I hadn't done this ring, I wouldn't have understood how those components need to fit together. But because I had that experience, I was able to make those components in wax, still preserving those proportions that you need, and to go on and make something truly unique for a friend of mine. So in this context, that would be called custom jewelry, not handmade, because it's made from pre-cast components. I carved the wax, I finished it up, I did the engraving, I did the stone setting, I put the prongs on separately, but it's still not handmade according to the law. That's custom. That's not to diminish it in any way, but it's important to draw a line between what's what. So this silver 3-stone ring I still haven't set, because when you're at New Approach for the 12-week program, you're going at such a breakneck pace that we didn't even have time to finish it up and polish it. But really, that's the easy part. Once you understand it, it's just a matter of sitting down and doing it. So I should probably do that. I've been itching for some resolution in recent days, so maybe it's time to polish this up and get some natural stones in there, because cubic zirconia it's shiny and all, but I like natural stones. So let's move on to the platinum ring. This one, the silver ring, and the platinum ring, if you look at them side by side, are effectively the same size. They are actually the same finger size, but one of my favorite things about these is because they take up about the same amount of physical space, but as we mentioned before, platinum is about twice as dense as silver. So one of my favorite things to do is have somebody hold out their hand and I drop the silver ring into their hand, take it out, and then I drop the platinum ring into their hand. It's incredibly shocking to go, whoo, with the additional density of platinum. Not to mention it's going to wear a lot longer. This is something that can last multiple generations. This one, you're going to get a couple decades. But the other thing is that platinum has different properties. It plays by different rules. When you're working with silver or gold, the rules are very similar. The way that you need to go about dealing with it when you're soldering and using abrasives are very, very cross-compatible. But platinum, no, you need to go out of your way to learn that. And that's a huge part of why I went back to the United States to join New Approach's program. 5 years out of the country. But it's such a unique program covering stone setting, hand fabrication, platinum itself. All of these things together make it an incredibly unique program in the world, especially to do it that quickly. So the final week is all about platinum. We hand fabricate the head, and then the ring shank, which is the same as this ring shank, that was a precast component. So this ring is not considered a completely handmade ring, according to the definition. The head is, and if I wanted to go out of my way and hand fabricate the shank, I could definitely do that. But again, with New Approach, you've only got 12 weeks, you've only got so much time, you've already learned the skills to do a split shank like this. No point in adding an extra week onto the program just to do a shank in platinum. You can already do it in your own time. And that week on platinum was incredibly humbling and super innovating because you learn the properties of this incredibly unique metal. So what makes it so unique? Well, just like with gold and silver, it is ductile and malleable and all of these things, but in some ways it's more ductile and a little bit less malleable than gold. The density is one part of that, but all of this compounds into how you have to deal with finishing. You can file on platinum all you want, but because it's so much more dense than silver and substantially more dense than gold, you have to spend a lot more time reducing the grades so that you get a high polish. The uniformity of that finish is really important. You can't skip all the steps that you could do with silver if you were using aggressive polishing compounds. This one, you get it close enough, buff it up with some nice polishing compounds and you're done. This one, no. You're going to spend more time and you need to intentionally go through those extra steps to get it to a high finish before you even start thinking about polishing compounds. And then there's fire. Gold and silver throughout history have been able to be worked by primordial peoples. Sometimes even in campfires. If you look at the Scythians from way, way, way back when they were still riding around on horses in the steppes, being lords of Central Asia and Europe, they made some of the most incredible gold jewelry known to man in a campfire. But it's not until recently that we've had the technology to get hot enough to even think about working in platinum, let alone discover it and recognize it different from something like silver. But that extra working temperature that you need in order to fuse or solder in platinum is orders of magnitude higher than silver or gold. By the time you get ready to work platinum, gold and silver would have already melted into a sad puddle. Another key difference is that platinum does not oxidize. So it's called by some the most noble of metals, because if you take silver, and this is one thing that you have to do when you're working in a studio that has both platinum and silver around, is you have to make sure that you're not mixing silver and platinum because it'll contaminate the platinum. So one thing that we were told to do in New Approach is set it on fire, because silver, it's going to go bright red, and then when it cools down, it's going to be black. It will have oxidized to some degree. Platinum is going to laugh at you, so the temperature needs to be much higher, and then when it cools down, it's still white. So in fact, there are some projects where I will be able to do engraving first in platinum and then solder the pieces together separately. If I want to add prongs on later and have engraving in some areas that would be almost impossible to get to otherwise, I couldn't do that in silver. But if I have the stones to do it, I can do that in platinum. And the other thing that gives you incredible humility working with platinum, as I said, the temperatures are higher, but what you don't understand is how much higher. So much higher that I need special glasses to even look at the piece of jewelry that I'm working on. I like vintage things. I've mentioned that. Now these are cobalt glasses, welder's glasses from back in the day, but we can also use the modern kind. In fact, these are a little bit darker, so if I'm going in to do a big melt, I can go full dork mode. But not only that, because you're working at such high temperatures, steel is even going to melt. So I have to go and use tungsten. Tungsten tweezers or ceramic, these kinds of space-age materials are what are necessary to work in platinum. If I was just using the average steel soldering pick to go and do my operations, then my platinum jewelry would get contaminated. Totally ruined. Send it off, refine it, start all over again. So platinum really gives you humility because it helps you to understand that it wasn't until recently in history we've actually been able to even approach this most noble of metals. And it endures better. And it's actually white, unlike white gold, which is yellow. And given the fact that we're now at a time in history where gold is at a historical high, frankly, I don't understand why anybody's thinking about white gold. Even with the additional density and therefore larger need of metal in platinum, it's still a more attractive price point than white gold. And it lasts better. And it's more pleasant to work with. So do us all a favor and forget about white gold. And I didn't set the stones on this one either. 3-stone platinum ring. I wonder, what would you put in this? Leave me a comment down below with your preferences. Those of you that are interested in starting the conversation about custom jewelry, head over to gemshepherd.com, where you can contact me directly or join my mailing list. If you don't know what you would like, but you like to see projects that I'm working on, that's the list that you need to be on. Otherwise, hit like, hit subscribe, tell all your friends about me. Until next time, bye-bye.